Debuting in the upcoming Medarot Survivor game coming in early February 2025, this Chang'e type is making a brief pit stop in Medarot S along the way to drop a couple new skills and a very graceful appearance. It is CHG00, Koga Senjo, with a mostly new kit of Hyper Wave, BA Shot, Shoot Bash, C Legs, and the leg ability of Auto Repair, which will passively restore HP to all parts when gaining CG. Now, as another newcomer to the Medarot Survivor game coming here early 2025, this model, based off the legendary and mythical moon goddess of Chinese mythos, is a very graceful and just as similarly and equally dangerous model all the same, sporting a leg type that puts her at an advantage where basically all others are not, and a very powerful shoot counter and crowd control mechanic at her disposal. Hyper Wave on the head part is a melee attribute ailment skill that upon attacking the target will inflict wave on it, which is a 25% debuff to the enemy's heat and cool stats, but will also inflict a no defense status on the enemy. Now that is normally where the standard wave does come to an end, but Hyper Wave, it does have a couple extra perks to it, making it just a little bit more worth using across the board. Namely, the fact that it does pack pierce damage, so it's going to be just notably more aggressive than a standard ailment type skill. And it also has a relatively high base success, which means you're going to be pretty hard pressed for people to dodge or graze it, and you're going to have a pretty solid chance inflicting it pretty consistently. The only real drawback is that as a hyper type of attack, it does also mean that you cannot dodge or defend on cooldown. And if anyone does bring stat cleanse or anything similar of the like to the field, this is going to kind of hurt your overall chance of making this ailment stick. BA Shot on the right arm, or expanding the name to Blow Away Shot, is a brand new skill which is new in the sense that it's a shooty version of something we already have, but with a couple extra perks added onto it. But simply explained, BA Shot is essentially a shooting version of the standard attack of Blow Away, which upon attacking the target will push the enemy away from the user. This means that if you catch them on the tail end of their heat phase, for instance, and you hit them just hard enough, you do have a chance to be able to basically force them to restart their heat phase. Or if you have bad timing and just don't quite juggle it at the right timing, it does mean you can also accelerate the enemy's cooldown phase to the point they can basically start their next turn almost immediately. The other thing to note about BA Shot, which sets it apart from standard Blow Away, is the fact that it also ignores defense. So this one is going to be notably harder and just a little bit stronger than the standard Blow Away attack. But much like Blow Away, it also does not pack any kind of damage. So this does mean it's going to be basically a one-hit nuke if you are planning to use it, mostly for breaking single parts relatively quickly and not really paying attention too much to your total damage output. Shoot Bash on the left arm is a brand new defense type skill being introduced into the game, which is more or less a rehashing and a tuning up of an already pre-existing type of guard skill. But explaining briefly, Shoot Bash is essentially Shoot Guard, which is a defensive stance that will intercept all incoming blows, but negate specifically shooting skills. But much akin to it was with Shadow Armor introducing Fight Bash, Shoot Bash also will counter the enemy with a stun ailment applied to them, meaning that they're going to be stuck in place for a handful of time as a further punishment, not just for wasting your time, but also theirs, if you are able to successfully intercept an attack for your allies on the field. But as a friendly reminder though, because this is a non-meta change type shield, this does mean that it is susceptible to being countered or broken by anyone using, say, Destroy, Terminate, Flip, or Panic, or something similar of the like, which can auto-cancel any kind of guards. So just a word of caution is advised if you're planning to use it for that purpose. C Legs means that she's going to have relatively decent coverage across most terrains across the board, focusing mostly on just average terrain balancing and not necessarily as high speed, but mostly having a higher emphasis on dodge. But given that this is a rather special kind of model that's being debuted in Medarot S, the stats get just a little bit more of a grace to kind of keep her competitively relevant. With a base mobility of 791, this will already put her on a very impressive edge where most other sea legs tend to want to dream of being. Where most other sea legs tend to want to sit at between, say, 5 or 600 mobility at best, maybe 700 for a much faster one, typically. 791 is a really good start on a terrain that a lot of leg types are going to be really struggling on, unless they're willing to negate a terrain mastery entirely, such as, say, with floats or even tank leg. An evade of 1806, of course, is par for the course with sea legs, though, as it means she's going to have a very solid time dodging or grazing incoming attacks when she is able to do them. With a melee resist of 1117 and a shoot resist of 1144, it's actually a very solidly and pretty decently well-rounded sea leg, which you don't really see all that often. This means that she can hold her own up close and personal pretty easily, and just as easily support herself from taking pot shots from the enemy from afar. But with a mastery of BA shots with crowd control, this does kind of tie into the fact that she can basically fight anyone at range or up close and not really see too much of a change in her performance. When it comes to armor, she's packing about 39, almost 4,000 for the head, about almost 3,500 for the right arm, just shy of 5,000 for the left, and legs at just shy of 4,300. So relatively healthy across the board of where females tend to want to sit at, especially with the rather mixed coverage auxiliary support, shoot, fight, defender model that Koga Senjo does bring to the table. Well, her base power isn't too shabby either. The mid 1300s for hyper wave there, which even then, power really isn't necessarily important for negative ailments, but it is nice to have, especially with the piercing. And BA shot with a base power of over 2k means it's going to be hitting moderately hard. Whether that means you are able to accelerate their cooldown phase or stall their heat phase with it, it's still going to be a very painful blow all the same. Especially with a heat stat of the high 600s and a cooldown of mid 700s, means she can fire this off pretty quickly. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Koga Senjo a pretty well-rounded 7 out of 10 across the board. Her stats are pretty solid from one side to another when it comes to armor, damage reduction, and even her base mobility isn't bad either. Especially with a heat stat of mid 900s on shoot bash there, and a cooldown of 766 means that she can basically set herself up on the center line with very little difficulty if she chooses to go the defensive route. But a couple things to note as particular concerns or weaknesses is the fact that, of course, she is an aquatic type leg, which means she is of course weak to anyone that is bringing anti-sea to the table, so a word of caution is advised there. And BA shot, as powerful as it is a crowd controlling skill, as this means that it does require just a little bit of juggling if you want to use it effectively. And Hyper Wave, also inflicting a no dodge and no defend on cooldown, does make it just a little risky to use as well. But auto repair does kind of tie back into her fairly solidly, as any times that she does gain CG, such as say from a metal nature or charging metaphors, a portion of what she earns is going to go back into all of her parts as HP. So this does give her just a little bit more of a hand in survival across the board. As mixed parts, I do have to rate her equally at a 7 out of 10 for these same reasons. While as a pure set she is kind of scattered in what she brings to the table, mixed parts is where you're going to be really cooking a lot of what she brings to the table. Hyper Wave you may or may not use super often, BA shot for the same reason for the crowd control, but Shoot Bash is probably going to be one of the best parts on her for your ready-to-go defenders for teams, especially if they have a shooting emphasis, such as, say, against Black Cruz or Fermion as examples. And sea legs with very solid aquatic stats across the board are really nice too. Good base mobility at almost 800, relatively well-rounded damage reduction, high evade, and a heavy support of 2 means it's going to be a very solid female sea leg you can use basically anywhere very conventionally.